Monism is the view that there is one fundamental substance. Monists hold to the idea that everything of our experience comes from one source. The first monists we will look at in this lecture are Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes. We will follow that with Heraclitus, Parmenides, Empedocles, and Anaxagoras. Thales, who is our first philosopher in the history of philosophy, brought to us the idea of monism. He reasoned, as far as we can tell, that since the natural kinds seem to be composed of the natural elements, that is, the biological units, plants, animals, humans, seem to be composed of earth, water, fire, and air, okay, it's natural to conclude, he thought, that maybe the natural elements were also made of fundamental stuff. Maybe the earth and the water and fire and air also broke down to something more fundamental. One thing. One first principle. He believed in that, he argued for it, and then he also tried to describe or name or identify that fundamental stuff. Being in Greek Ionia, on the Mediterranean seacoast, Aristotle argued that Thales, in digging into the ground, would have run into water. He recognized that all natural kinds had moisture in them. And on a hot summer day, overlooking the sea coast, he may have seen steam rising from the water and then concluded that heat, which is an element of fire, okay, an aspect of fire, is produced by water. Thus, Thales concluded that the fundamental stuff was water. We sometimes say of Thales, Thales held the view that everything is water. His student, Anaximander, recognized the idea of monism and embraced it in full. But he was also in Greek Ionia, and he had an understanding that some of the areas in Ionia was too dry. The mountain range was too dry, so he did not think that everything could be moist, could have moisture. He also had an issue with understanding Thales' claim of fundamental substance being water and what was the real water. Thus, Anaximander came up with the idea that whatever the fundamental stuff is, it had to be different from the natural elements. He called this the apeiron. The apeiron means indeterminate, boundless, unlimited. He described the fundamental substance, he did not try to name it. So Anaximander gave us a deeper understanding of what it is to have a monistic view. Anaximenes came in the picture, student of Anaximander, saw the theoretical richness of Anaximander, but really liked the tangible aspect of Thales' theory. He looked at the natural elements, earth, water, fire, and air, and concluded that air, seen in the right way, could be the fundamental substance. Air, thinly spread out, could represent the fundamental substance, and in that sense, it would be just like Anaximander thought it would be. And at the same time, it was tangible. Anaximenes argued, if someone say air is not tangible, ask them to stop breathing. Thus, we have the Ionian philosophers giving us the beginning of fundamental understanding of what the stuff was, or is. But this quickly changed as a new philosopher came on board, Heraclitus. Heraclitus recognized that the Ionian philosophers were focused on trying to identify the fundamental stuff, but we had other issues on the table. Heraclitus argued that since we accepted monism, that the real situation we had to deal with was how things become the way they are. Heraclitus argued that the only constant in reality is change. We need to account for how they become the way they are. Heraclitus introduced us to the idea of cosmology, and he tried to give us a theory. Heraclitus argued that the fundamental stuff had to be a spiritual fiery element. And this spiritual fiery element would actually guide everything into becoming what it is. Spiritual for him meant an intelligent force. Nature was imbibed some kind of intelligence that allowed it to produce the earth, the water, and fire, as well as the natural elements, the natural kinds that were actually formed from the natural elements. Heraclitus' view suggested that everything was in constant change. This view sounded great because most people can identify with constant change. However, another philosopher that followed Heraclitus did not quite agree that everything changed. This philosopher was Parmenides. Parmenides came on the scene thinking that fundamental change that does not occur. He argued against change. His argument basically raised the proposition: for there to be fundamental change, it can only occur in two ways. Non-being, non-existence becomes existence, or existence becomes non-existence. If you are a monist and you believe that from absolutely nothing, non-existent, you can get something, it seems like a logical fallacy. Parmenides conclude that can't occur. But if that is true, you can't go from being the one to nothing, because if that were the case, it would never be the one. It wouldn't be there in the first place. So Parmenides concluded then that fundamental change is impossible. But he went a little further. He also went on to say that all change that we observe and experience was also an illusion. Real change did not occur according to Parmenides. Well, this put on one side Heraclitus and on the other side Parmenides. Two philosophers seem to be at odds at this stage, okay? They seem to be at odds. Something perhaps you can decide which one seemed to be more accurate. But what Parmenides gave us with his argument was that fundamental substance, okay, cannot come out of reality, cannot come out of nothing. Neither can it go into nothing. In other words, he brought us to the idea of necessary existence. For Parmenides, and it seems to be accurate, fundamental substance has necessary existence. It is eternal, okay? It is unchanging in the sense, at least in the sense that it cannot go out of existence. And he also thought it was necessarily one. Other philosophers who followed in his suit were Empedocles and Anaxagoras. Empedocles embraced the idea that ultimate reality is one, eternal and unchanging. But at the same time, he embraced that in reality we had real changes. So he disagreed with this aspect of Parmenides' view. Empedocles had a theory in which two cosmological forces, love and strife, worked on this cosmic egg, okay, which produced at first the four roots, which were the natural elements for the other philosophers. And from that, a random combination of the four roots produced all natural kinds. Empedocles' theory was consistent with Parmenides' insights with respect to ultimate reality, and at the same time consistent with Heraclitus' view that change is real. Because Empedocles' theory suggests that the cosmic forces, love and strife, couldn't come from nothing, as Parmenides suggested. Therefore, they had to come from the one. Another theory, which also tried to make sense of the Heraclitus-Parmenides debate, was Anaxagoras' view. Anaxagoras used the notion of nous, which represents universal mind, and the seeds. Nous would be the cosmological force which would give order to things. And the seeds were the basic elements on which nous acted. Now what's special about Anaxagoras' theory is that the nous was separate from the seeds, which was very odd for a monistic theory. And at the same time, the seeds were considered to be like seeds that we plant. That is, in each seed, the whole was contained. This made it very, very difficult to make sense of the theory, because in each thing was everything else. And in Anaxagoras' theory, we are all part of each other. We all contain the whole, except for in different proportion. These philosophers represent the monistic view. They made presentations trying to argue in different ways that fundamental reality consists of one thing.